Ambassador Navdeep Suri joining us, as is Zorawar Dulet Singh, author and historian. Thank you both so much for being with us. Ambassador Suri, why don't you start off? What do you think was if the key highlight of this particular summit was the expansion of BRICS, how do you think India should react to that? Be happy about it, be unhappy about it, say there was no other choice?
My sense is, Vikram, that it's a mixed bag. We were, let me say, not particularly enthusiastic about the expansion. We wanted to make sure that we understand what the criteria are. I think what we've been able to succeed in getting is that at least the members that have been inducted, most of them are countries with whom we have very good relations, particularly Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia. What we didn't want was a situation where China is able to use the expansion to back the BRICS with its friends or worse than friends, countries on which it can exert a degree of pressure.
Zorawar, what would be your take on the BRICS summit?
See, I would say the context of today with the ongoing Great Power conflict in Europe, major crisis again in globalization, weaponization of public goods by the US. I think all this has put BRICS at a juncture where it needs to sort of take stock of where it wants to go. I think the decision that they've taken collectively is now the business as usual approach of gradually chugging along and waiting for the West to get its act together isn't working. So I think they've stepped up by broadening the membership. These states, as you know, are major commodity exporters. It also links up the decision to take these specific states will also help in de-risking the global financial system. So there's a little bit of that, not say de-dollarization, but a dollar plus system where you're going to have a critical mass of economies that can now choose to do something else with the revenues that they get from the export. So that's happening. But I think on the whole, India would have liked to perhaps slow it down to some extent. But I think ultimately the choice is, if you want a multipolar, interconnected world, you're going to have more actors come on board with you. And I think that was the call of the time, really.
Zorawar, there's this perception that India may want to slow things down with BRICS just a little bit. Is that essentially because India doesn't want a China-dominated organization to be really, gathering too much traction? And let's face it, China, at least economically, does have a lot of weightage when it comes to BRICS. China does try to use that in other groupings as well, like SCO. So is that really the reason why India has to walk that tightrope walk? It doesn't want a China-dominated organization.
So this is one of the, I would say, impressions out there that this is a China-dominated body. But if you look at the charter of BRICS and the way decision-making occurs, it is through consensus. India has a veto power, in a sense. I mean, it's not going to use it just brazenly. It wants a constructive solution. So this is the opposite of the Bretton Woods. You had a major superpower that would get its job done because it had client states. You can't say that about the BRICS. I mean, no matter what you say about the other states other than China, they're all proud, strong, independent states, right? There may be an asymmetry of GDP, but there's enough capacity, national capacities. So I would say a BRICS, even with 10 members, will still have the basic framework. I would actually flip the question and say, why are the Chinese doing this by restraining what they could do on its own? And the reason for that is very simple. They cannot, because of a variety of reasons, have the type of influence that they have in a unilateral way. I think some of it is through lessons of the past, but also they simply don't have the soft power or the ability to project their vision of the world in a unilateral way. So they have to, in a sense, compromise. They have to be in a multilateral setting. So they're investing in this for the same reason that we are.
Right, Ambassador Suri, on the question of what I think China may have wanted or Russia would have wanted is to set up this entire organization as something which is in direct opposition to the West, right? The anti-West or the not West is what they would have probably preferred. Now, They've been able to get Iran into BRICS also, which may well want the same thing, something which is anti-West. But that has to be counterbalanced by the fact that countries like India and perhaps the UAE and Saudi Arabia aren't necessarily hostile to the West either.
So I think if you use two expressions and they are not the same. It is not anti-West. It is not the West. It's an alternate perspective on a lot of issues. And I think the reason why we've seen a fair bit of give and take during this summit is because there's a recognition amongst the five founding BRIC members now, you could say, or the four, and South Africa as the fifth, that we have a unique window of opportunity over the next 2 years. This is the first time that you had India as a BRICS member taking the G20 presidency. Brazil is next, and after that is South Africa. And the fact that the three members of BRICS back to back for 3 years have an opportunity to shape some of the discourse in G20 and create a degree of convergence on multilateral financial institutions, on payment mechanisms, on climate finance, on a whole host of issues that matter to the global South. I think that is the perspective of not the West, that you can't have all these large organizations or select organizations dominated only by a Western perspective. There is an alternate view which matters.
Right. Zorawar, it's also interesting to look at what didn't happen, right? The currency, the talk of there'd be some sort of a BRICS currency, that has not happened. And clearly, relations between India and China are still being somewhat frosty. There was a meeting on the sidelines that did happen, but not some sort of a formal sit-down, detailed conversation.
Yeah, so coming to the India-China bit, I think that's a work in progress in a sense. I think both sides are trying to see if they can stabilize the border crisis, but that I don't think we should link that here. I mean, if it at some stage it may happen, might not happen, and I think both sides are holding on to their positions. They might adjust them. On the dollar bit, yes, to have a common currency, which was sort of painted as the ultimate benchmark of a non-dollar system, I think that's obviously complicated. These countries are not like the European Union, where they've ceded almost everything to a supranational authority in Brussels, which then reports to Washington, right? So these are sovereign states. They want to protect their central banks. So they will have to find different ways to create this de-risk system. Part of it is happening through trade in your local currencies, which frankly has already begun. It's just the scale will increase. Now, it's actually to be interesting to be seen how Saudi Arabia, Iran, which are major commodity producers and exporters, how they will denominate their exports.
All right, last word from you, Ambassador Suri. Where does BRICS go from here?
But, I just, because it's such an important point about the BRICS currency, I think the reason it's way too early for that is that there isn't any kind of consensus at this point of time amongst the members on what form would it take. And the Chinese clearly have been pushing it because in their matrix, it would be a yuan-dominated currency, and that's something that's not acceptable to several other players. I think where we are heading is many more bilateral trading arrangements, and I think something that hasn't really caught people's attention is that India and UAE have done their first oil trade worth $62 million in our respective local currencies, and that's quite a big deal actually. And if that's the pathway where commodity trading happens, you will probably see not the de-dollarization, but at least a progressive slide down of the dollar. Where does it go from here? I think the expanded BRICS, when it meets next year, and when the meetings of the various working groups start from January, it will create new avenues for these countries. It will give more weight to the formulations that we put forth. whether in New York or in Geneva, whether in WTO or in other places. So I think there's a positive note on which I think this particular summit has ended.
All right, I'd like to thank both of you for those really, really valuable insights into what's been happening at BRICS.